This particular time we're getting together is about giving and receiving feedback, which is a lot of fun. So I don't know how to really kick it off necessarily, other than I
Um,
haven't read the excerpt of the novel that you sent me. Actually, you sent me the whole manuscript, didn't you?
I sent you the whole
Yeah.
manuscript, and I'm slowly getting back to it in various different ways.
Hmm.
And I think I caught myself because I think I was doing different ways of getting back into the story as another way of putting off the actual work. So, in other words, I was like, what if I just did a sort of like digital post-it notes about how I want it to go? And then I drew a map of the mall that this takes place in, where all the stores are. And then I started like in my notes on my iPhone, I started another like treatment process to try and organize my thoughts about it. And so I understand that that might be all part of the process in the end, but I think I caught myself because I think I might be just sort of, putting off the actual work by finding new ways of experimenting with how I want the book to go. So,
Sure, sure.
yeah,
It's all
yeah,
that low
yeah,
value work that is probably necessary and it's probably useful, but it's not stuff that is actually going to make it to the page that the reader is going to read. So I mean, yeah, that
yeah,
you have to make time to do that stuff, but is now the right time, and how long do you allow
yeah.
yourself to do that? Yeah, and again, only you're going to know that.
Yeah, and I think I'm just afraid that it's getting a little bit too scattered. So that's why I think I'm glad that I've recognized that because I've done that in the past. If I have a piece and maybe however long that piece may be, there's like maybe I need to visualize it with post-it notes, or maybe I need to focus on what the proverbial what the character wants to eat for breakfast, that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And so I'm just kind of glad that I'm sort of seeing some of my old habits and being like, hold on a second, just start writing, you moron.
yeah. So I mean, are you energized to get back into it, or what is it that you may want or need to really kind of start that engine?
I was thinking about narrative in smaller pieces, shorter pieces, and I'm very excited about a small piece that I've written. It just kind of came off the hip, and I know that I've talked to you before, and I think we're at eye rolling phase about how much I love had the online literary magazine. I love it very much. I just don't think I'm the kind of writer that will ever get published in it, but um, the good thing about the calls that they have that fill up so quickly is that it at least gives me a little bit of a focus. Like, oh, they're having a submission period on such and such a day. It helps me kind of have a deadline. So I've been very excited about a piece that I've been trying to be a little bit more narrative driven, a little more grounded in myself, not something that's very like esoteric. And I'm very excited about it. That's kind of been nice, but it's taken me away from the novel. So I was getting more excited about getting back to my mall noir novel, and then I got taken away from this short piece. So I'm just trying to organize my time now. It's been a very, very busy month. Work is crazy because we've got a very, very big client in. So yeah, I was excited at the beginning of February. Some personal stuff happened and work happened, and now I'm sort of like I need to get back into it. And that's the thing that's my biggest pitfall is trying to get back into something after it's been too long. It's great to look at something with fresh eyes, but I also personally have this kind of idea of like, oh, nope, lost the thread, shrug. Not going to go back to that piece ever again, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And I think, that's why we're talking about giving and receiving feedback now at this stage. Because once you've got that full movement and you give it to an alpha reader or a beta reader, like just however you want to call it, but somebody to take a look at it and go, is this worth pursuing? Um,
Yeah.
that might be the way to kind of cold start that engine. Because
Yeah.
in my opinion, the times that I've been really energized about something is either at the very beginning when you get that fresh idea and you're like, oh my God, this is going to be so amazing. And then you run with it. And then it's been dormant for a while. And then something happens that gives you that spark or that shock that you're like, oh, I see where this could go now. And I think really good feedback can be that catalyst. It isn't necessarily, and
Yeah.
I think a lot of people think Well, gosh, I wouldn't ever, use feedback as a catalyst because it's so negative. And I do think a lot of people
Right.
provide really crappy feedback. So we're going to do what I consider to be a public service and provide you with some tips and strategies on how to give feedback that is useful, beneficial, and then also how to receive that feedback from other people, even if it isn't super useful, in a way that can still help you push your narrative forward. Sound good?
Yeah, that sounds really good. Yeah.
Okay. Well, as soon as I come up with it, I'll let you know. No.
All right. And
And
scene. Thank you very
scene. We're
much.
good. Yeah.
Scene. You know, it's it's funny, and I was thinking about you the other day because I know that we were going to talk about this today. In my job, I'm in, I guess, you know, as simply as possible, I'm in a management position. And hearing I don't want to say complaints because complaints has such a negative connotation, but when someone that works for you comes to you with an issue, I started to really think about, giving and receiving feedback as a writer because you're trying to understand what they're saying and be sympathetic towards it and try and make them feel like they're understood, like they're heard. And it sort of reminded me of, of how you're dealing with someone else's piece. They're coming to you with a piece. They're trying to have something that is coming from them. They're trying to be, understood and heard. And you have to give feedback that makes it seem like it's like you're both moving in the same direction. And sometimes that can be, I just feel like that's very, very tricky, especially when you're at work and where tempers can run very high.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it's always very, very tricky.
Yeah. I think you're fair to say that there is some correlation between performance conversations at work and feedback that you would give to a writer. Where that doesn't quite track is that usually, like you're in a management position, so am I, and I have direct reports. So when I'm speaking to them about their performance, it has to be kind of a top-down conversation. Now, I try to approach that conversation as peer to peer as possible because you have to establish a rapport and develop trust, and you don't want to speak down to people. They're not going to receive that very well. So I try really hard to make that as much as possible a peer to peer, but the power dynamic is different at work. I'm their
Yeah.
boss. But in this
Yeah.
position, and I'm really glad you brought that up because that is the first thing I wanted to mention about giving feedback is that really don't speak from a superior position. Even if this is a novice writer and you think that you are a seasoned, experienced, maybe often published writer of some note and that you know best. And that might be true, but approaching the conversation that way will probably do more to alienate that person and have them actually not listen to you rather than speaking ex cathedra and sort of providing the wisdom
Yeah.
to the novice. Nobody wants to be spoken to
Yeah.
that way. Even people in that position who are like, "Oh, all great and powerful Oz, please tell me what's wrong with my story." They're still not. They're going to chafe a little bit at being spoken down to. So as much as possible, approach that interaction as an equal or peer to peer. And so that means in the manner in which it's delivered, the amount of attention that you're providing to it. So like if somebody has asked you, "Hey, can you read my short story?" And it's a 5,000 word short story. And you're like, "Yeah, I'll get to it." And then it takes you forever to get to it. Then you've already sort of lost the high ground because it took you forever to read it. So how important is it? And then when you read
Yeah.
it and you provide that feedback, if you give maybe 10 or 15 words of feedback, that's not going to be super helpful. On the flip side, if you provide a treatise that is as long or longer than the actual story in sort of, dissecting what it is, that might not be helpful either. And so it's really
Yeah.
about balance. So one good tip is to ask the person giving you the work before you give the feedback, "Hey, what kind of feedback would you like on this?" I think that's a very
Yeah.
fair way to start. Because, Tim, you gave me the first draft of your novel, which I have not yet read, but I don't know that I ever asked you what kind of feedback. I think I told you what I was going to give you, and you're like, "Yeah, that's fine." So, like, we at least had that alignment, but I don't think I asked you what you
Yes.
wanted from that. So I apologize.
No, no. I think it's important to note that you and I have been trading stories, novels, pieces, whatever, essays for a very, very long time. So our relationship has been built for quite a while. And I think that it's easy for us to have that sort of back and forth of like, yeah, whenever, yeah, do the thing that you do, Art, or, or I'll do the thing that I do. And whenever I give, sometimes when I've given pieces to other people to read, I find that I'm like, oh, this isn't art. I forgot because you've been the only person that's read 99% of my work since 1992. So I keep forgetting that you have to build new relationships with other people. And so I think it has to start out with a little bit of dialogue in that respect. And I think that that's something that you just said, knowing what you're looking for. Like, I think that's, if you're being given a piece, I think it's good to start off with a, like, well, what would you like me to look for? For example, I met a friend of mine a couple of years ago. I've only known her for about 2 years. I know that this one person is very good at returning work and saying, you have a dangling participle. And I don't even know what that means, but I just came up with an example. So it's almost like you could build a team of readers if you know what readers could do what for you.
Yeah, that's a great point, because if you've got people who are sticklers for the minutia of your story and you don't have any readers who are going to talk to you about how they engage with the character or anything that's on a macro level, then you may get all the little tiny particulars correct and then miss a big part of the story. Like, well, this character doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the grammar, like, ooh,
Yeah.
sweet. Look at those quotation
Yeah,
marks.
exactly.
So you need it all, you need it all. And that's
Yeah.
why having a large, really diverse readership is going to be beneficial for you. Trust is important. You got to have that trust too. I think we mentioned it earlier, but I
Yeah.
kind of want to mention it now. Agreeing on a deadline can be very helpful. So if you, like, for example, you sent me your novel and we didn't ever say, okay, well, I'm going to have this back by, 3 Tuesdays from now, or whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, I'm not here to say you should always return work within 2 weeks or you're a scumbag. Like, no, life happens, but I think it is
Yes.
healthy in that peer-to-peer supportive manner to have that discussion up front. What kind of feedback do you want? When would you like to get this feedback back? And so that way, if the writer's like, well, I have to submit, because you've told me this before, like, I need to submit for this story for a contest
Oh,
and
yeah.
it's due tomorrow.
Yeah.
Like, you've texted me that
Yeah.
multiple times. Like, if you can give me feedback, that's great. But if not, like, totally cool. So, like, we're already following
There's
these rules, right?
Yeah, yeah. I love those. I never really think about those times when I'm like, hey, Art, oh gosh, you just run through this one time, and if it makes sense. Meanwhile, Art is at the office, where he's just about to work on a $5,000 million presentation, and he's late to take his son to baseball and all of this. And sure, so yeah, I
Yeah.
should probably mention here out loud. Thank you for all of that, because I have. I have shivved you like a disgruntled prisoner in a maximum security prison with some of my pieces.
So what we've got now is this sort of, agreement, this contract of sorts, where we have shared the work. We've kind of discussed what you want to get back on it, roughly when you'd like to get that back, and we kind of have agreement there. The next thing that I think is really important for anyone providing feedback is don't try to fix the work that you're reading. It's not yours, and they didn't ask you to fix it. It's really about providing your insight as a reader. And so there are authors that use readership that aren't writers, and they'll actually go purposely find people who, aren't writing peers, for example. They're quote unquote just readers, but that's some of the best feedback you can get. If you write murder mysteries and you find, a couple of people who just really love murder mysteries and have read a ton of them, and then give them your manuscript and go, tell me what you think, then you're going to get really good feedback from a reader's point of view of, this is the expectation that I had, and this is what happened, and this is where it didn't work for me, and this is what I loved. So that can be really beneficial. So don't feel like you have to have only writers provide this feedback.
When I was younger, it was very easy for me to read other people's work and then give opinions on it or try and help or try and do something. And it was probably all bad, because when I'm in my own piece, I forget. I get so involved in the piece sometimes that I forget I'm not giving all of the information that a reader would need. We've talked about that before, that I sometimes do that. And that's why I sometimes just need a reader to tell me, hey, does this make sense? When approaching a piece from somebody and trying to kind of give feedback, I'm trying to do a lot less and listen more. And maybe that's why I brought up when you're having a discussion with someone at work, I'm trying to listen more to understand what they're saying. What do you want the piece to say to me? And let me read it, and I'll find out if that's what you're saying.
That's interesting. I wouldn't want to know what the author's intent was before I read, because I think it would cloud my judgment. It's almost like that physics principle where the act of observing a particle changes the way the particle operates. Or
Yeah.
yeah, if I know what you're intending, then I'm gonna look for it, and it may not be as obvious, or it may not be there at all. Like Tim, one time way back when we were in college, it was at one of the writing workshops that we had together. So and it wasn't your story, it was somebody else, but I read this guy's story, and I saw, references to Castro and a bunch of other stuff. And I'm like, wow, this web is so intricately placed. And I'm so excited to kind of pick this apart. And I did. I wrote this, not treatise, but it's kind of probably 1,000 words on a story that was probably 2,000. And I had this whole, I mean, it felt like, conspiracy theorists when they put the pictures on the wall and they have the red string and they're like tying it all together.
Yeah.
That's what it was. And I was so proud of myself. And I roll it out in front of the whole class. It wasn't actually a board with string, but like I laid out my case like a lawyer in court. And I make this argument that must have taken 5 minutes. And 5 minutes in a workshop is a long amount of time. So I finally get to the end and I'm beaming with pride. I'm like the man. I am the perfect person to read anyone's work, sign up here. And the guy's like, yeah, I'd never considered any of that. I didn't intend any of that, but that's really cool. Thanks. And I was devastated. A Zeppelin losing its helium, like just kill me now. It was so bad because I was convinced that this guy was maybe not a genius, but like was onto something really good, and that I alone had sort of divined the secrets, and I was revealing it for everybody, ancient aliens style. And son of a bitch, this guy like just torpedoes me in the room. I still am a little bitter about that, but anyway, it was a good assessment,
There was a story that I had written in one of our classes at UNO, and one of the young women in the class got up and started writing things on the board about it, and I can't remember what it was, but she just like went to town in talking about why it was so bad. So that's all I remember. I don't really think I'm actually. Here's the thing, Art. Fix me. I don't think I'm very good at giving feedback. I really don't. Mainly because as a lifelong David Lynch fan who's been trying to figure out Twin Peaks, I got no idea what's going on there. You see that? Did you catch that? I almost swore. I almost had another quarter to send you to your house.
Nice.
So I always feel like I'll be doing a disservice if I'm like, I obviously can tell you that you were trying to invoke the principle that a light is a wave or a particle, like I feel very self-conscious when I'm asked to read something because I feel that I'm not going to help them. And I think that's why my idea is to say, well, what do you want? What do you want me to do? What am I looking for here? What is it you want me to look for? Grammar? Do you want me to look for the overall tone? Do you want me to look for this, that, and the third? So maybe I just need to read more pieces so I can be a little bit more confident. Not that there's a one answer for everything, but finding out how I give good feedback, finding out maybe where I can help is maybe a better way to say that.
I mean, I think that the best feedback that anyone can give is what they are honestly seeing without judgment. That's, to me, the best feedback. So if you are a reader who doesn't really care about grammar and you're more concerned with the quality of the characters or the quality of the description or the quality of the prose or any of those things, then that's what you should focus on. The thing that you're looking for when you come to a book and read it, that's probably what you're looking for. And that's okay. I mean, you just said it earlier that we should have large numbers of readers that cover a wide enough swath that you can kind of catch all the bases. So if you're not super strong in grammar, then, I mean, don't feel pressured to provide grammar notes unless something is obviously wrong and it jumps out at you, then just circle it and go, hey, you need to look up the rule on this. I mean, that's basically it. But yeah, I mean, the kind of feedback that I want from you when I give you short stories, for example, is did this thing hold together? Where did it hold your attention? Where did it lose you? Overall, did you like it? And, if I wrote another one, would you want to read it? Like
Yeah.
that's kind of all
Right.
because if the answer to that last one is no, all right, I got some work to do.
Yeah, I gotta just.
Yeah.
I feel the best feedback I get is when someone just says, "Great, amazing, fantastic," and whoever doesn't want this, they're a fool. That's I think the bottom line for me.
And how often have you received that feedback? Because I know what I send you, and it ain't that.
I can't I can't handle anything else than that. No, I think it's such a delicate dance to do with some folks. Yeah. And that's why I think it's almost really like a collaboration. Someone's really giving you their heart on the sleeve, being like, read this. It's raw, it's rough, it might not have all the right, commas in it and stuff like that. And so it's an enormous amount of trust that you get when someone is giving you something that is, not shaping there.
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder, you got to wonder, did Michelangelo like bring someone in when he had like one of David's arms? He's like, what do you think? Oh, I don't know.
you're gonna
Are
have
you
a
sure that's
second
where that
arm?
muscle goes? Yeah.
You're gonna do another arm?
That is, oh, I'm sorry. That was a leg? Oh, I'm so sorry. I thought that was an arm.
And then he would have said, "I am a genius. Go away." Who knows? I don't know how it works in painting, but like that Hemingway was getting feedback on "The Sun Also Rises." And again, I don't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure Gertrude Stein was providing him with significant coaching, or at least readership with notes, as he was drafting some of his most influential and popular works. So no one is above getting good feedback, and I think it's an integral part of the process. So like you need to build it
Yeah.
in, because if we just choose to do this in a vacuum and we only write for ourselves, then the chances are pretty good that you're the only one who's going to read it anyway. So let's try to get
Yeah.
the diversity of feedback and try to improve the work. Very often you think that something is working because you are looking for it. And then when you give it to someone else, they don't see it the same way. And if you have a range of people who don't see it the same way, and you're like, but it's right there. I mean, I know I've told this story before about my mom who read a piece that I wrote, and it all hinged on one particular word that was in the middle. And I know I've described this before. It was like a bottleneck, and it's almost like an
Yep.
hourglass. And if you don't read that one word, if you don't like get the significance of the one word, which was denim, then the whole thing falls apart because it's just a big puzzle that collapses on itself. And she's the one who really pointed that out to me. You can't hinge an entire story on one word that's hidden in the middle of the story. That's dumb. I mean, she was much nicer about it then, but that was the feedback. That's dumb. Don't do that.
Right.
And I
Right.
took her to heart. She was right. So I think you don't need consensus, though. That's really the last thing that I want to say about giving feedback is like if I give you feedback, Tim, about how you should approach your book, and actually I wouldn't do that. I would say this is what I'm getting from it. You don't have to accept that 100%. All you have to do is say thank you. you know, as
Yes.
far as like receiving that, just go, oh, okay, cool. Well, thank you for your perspective. I appreciate that. And then you set that on the side. And if a wave of people come back with that same sensation, then maybe you go, oh, well, maybe he was onto something here. But if most of the people or almost all the people who read your work don't mention that, well, then certainly don't focus on it and don't feel like it's a thing that you need to work on. That's just my
Yeah.
opinion. And so that ultimately that's all it is. It's just my opinion.
It's very important to remember that you as a writer are taking someone's time, maybe in a panic with a 400-word piece that's due in 2 hours for a submission to a contest. But whenever you're taking someone's time to help you read something, you have to be kind to that person in respect. If you disagree with it, if you agree with it, if you think that they have, completely gone against everything that you believe in and whatever, thank you is just the appropriate response. Not anything else. Thank them for their time. Great. Thank you. This is very helpful. Even if you don't agree with it at all, just try and be nice about it.
The whole idea that you would try to justify your work to them is absurd. We talked about it, I think, at a different episode where it's like, people read your work and they don't quite, quote unquote, get it. And then you feel compelled to go, oh, wait, well, let me explain to you. So if you look here and it's this phrase and this character, Well, none of that is relevant. You, the
Yeah,
author, aren't sitting next to
exactly.
every reader. You can't do that. Like, just recognize, okay, what they're saying is that what I thought was very clear isn't. So let me see what I can do about that.
It's tough because I know when I was younger, being open to criticism was tougher because I was like, oh no, I think I know what I'm doing. It's the hubris that I had as a younger person. It's like, no, they're probably wrong. Maybe they just didn't read it right. No, I think I've got a strong thing here. You've just gotta you gotta let that go and listen to it, regardless of what that criticism is.
Yeah. Let's start pivoting now to like receiving feedback because I think it's really important to have some good rules of the road for when you're getting the feedback from other people. And there is something that seems to run counter to what we've been saying that I want to just call out. First of all, try not to take it personally.
Yeah.
You intimated this earlier. It's very much a kind of an exposure when you provide something, especially if it feels unfinished. It's almost like a little baby bird in a nest, and you hand it over to somebody else who you need to trust that they're going to treat that with kindness and with respect and with an attitude of support, and not take out the sledgehammer and go, "I can't wait to beat this up," because that's not really going to help.
Yeah.
But if you get,
Yeah.
I think it's important to assess the intent of the person giving you the feedback. I have experienced in graduate school receiving feedback from people whose intent was obviously to take me down a peg. Right, wrong, or indifferent, it doesn't matter, but I could tell their goal was to take me down a notch. And so, what do you do with that kind of feedback? If the intent is obviously negative, where it is more of a personal attack or more of a that kind of value judgment, do I weight that as evenly as I do the feedback from someone whose intent is more positive or helpful or constructive? My argument, if somebody's intent is negative, that gives you permission to set it on the side. Again, say thank you, but set it on the side and really just don't use it, because more than likely they're trying to make you change something to be the way that they would write it, or they're trying to make you feel bad about yourself. And that's not helpful.
You're digging through this stuff to try and to mine what might be helpful for you. And yes, sometimes you're going to come up with somebody who's just like, yeah, I didn't like this at all. This is, you should refer to my piece. I've written this. You should see how I've. If it's just coming up to be someone who's listening to themselves talk, yeah, thanks. Thanks for your time.
Yeah.
Have a good day.
You know what else is a good indicator there? I'm glad you brought that up. If somebody starts their commentary with, well, this isn't normally the sort of thing I would read, but, and then they launch into something, they're probably not a good reader for that piece. If they're already admitting that they're on the outside and that they're coming fresh to that type of writing or that genre or whatever, then it's just not as valuable as it would be in our earlier example where you have two people who love mystery novels and you're writing a mystery novel. And so, yeah, I really want to know what these people think because they're steeped in that type of book. They like it. They know what to expect. And so that feedback is valuable. But if I read historical fiction all day and I have never read a mystery novel and I'm given a mystery novel to comment on, then I don't know what the genre expectations are, and it's not as helpful.
That's why I really feel like it's about building relationships. And I feel like you know a lot more writers currently than I do, Art. And do you have a pretty big community of folks that you could send stuff to? Like if you like, hey, I know piece A would do well with so and so, or piece B would be with someone such and such and so and so.
I think I lucked out that I went to two different graduate schools, met a ton of great people, and that my primary goal is to collect great people and hang on to them for my entire life. So that's like my goal. And so I wouldn't say it's a lot, but I certainly have more than a handful of people that I could share work with. But I also want to be very respectful of their time. So until I'm feeling like the work is solid, I'm not going to give it to them. And I just haven't put the time in yet to, I've only got like 20,000 words on the book, and that's only the first draft. I need another, God knows how many of everything. So I'm not in any shape to actually give work. And one thing that I don't want to encourage people to do is to share snippets. My God.
Yeah.
Okay, I have very strong
Yeah.
feelings about this, and these feelings might be wrong. So, folks out in the world, if you disagree with me, that's cool. And if you want to tell me how wrong I am, send me an email to tiffinwritingworkshop@gmail.com and ream me, okay? Feel free. But I don't think sharing partial scenes online in writing workshop forums is helpful. You wouldn't believe how much crap I see because I'm part of several writers groups on Facebook, for example, and these have tens of thousands of people in them. And I routinely see people go, oh, does this work? And they'll lob up, 500, 600 words of a scene. And then you've got 200 comments below it. And the comments range from, it's great, don't touch a thing, to this is garbage. And like some people are actively trying to insult the writer.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that can happen when, like, all right, so empirically you look at the work and it's bad. There's a ton of bad writing out on Facebook. And so I read that and I see the first 9 words and I'm like, nope, that is not something I want to spend my time on. But what kind of person, like really though, Tim, what kind of person is going to read this 600 word thing that's clearly garbage and then take the time to go into the comments and go, this is garbage because, and list off, 5 different things. And I think the problem is those folks didn't listen to our podcast and didn't follow the first
Right.
rule, which is don't speak ex cathedra, right? You're not the gatekeeper of language. And,
Yeah.
they don't know who the hell you are anyway. So even if you are the smartest guy in the room, I mean, have some humility and just help. But all right, so
Yeah.
let's go back to you've shared this thing online. You've gotten a ton of noise back. What do you do with that? Like, how is that helpful? So to me, that's a
Yeah.
cry into the darkness by someone who doesn't have the self-confidence to just finish the work and then make connections with people, do the networking that you talked about, Tim, to build a writing
Yeah.
group and have that trust and rapport with people who really care. Like, why just throw sentence fragments into the darkness? I don't understand it.
It's part of the social media world that we're in. There's this sort of instant gratification, and someone might need, speaking from a majestic height of insecurity, as I often do. I think that even having one person just be like, hey, this is good. It's like, all right, I'm going to take that comment. I'm going to covet it and forget everybody else. Of course, there are a zillion answers to why someone would do that. Sometimes it's just a quick fix. Hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? Look at us just over here talking about social media. I don't know if it's part of that new social media sort of mindset, but get off my lawn.
What's the
But
book with all the faces? What's that? Yeah.
I got that thing. But yeah, I mean, social media has changed these things where you can kind of have something and have an instant feedback. I'm not going to try and get into the mindset of someone that's like, hey, you know what? I'm going to take this one paragraph from my 600 million thousand word novel, stick it on Facebook to see what Uncle Joe thinks about it. I don't know what the deal is with that, but maybe it's a bit of a bit of help to get a little bit of somebody saying, hey, this is pretty good, you could do this or that with it. But
No, you're
yeah,
right.
you also got to put it
Yeah,
you
you're
put
right.
up you put up a, so with so much you put up with so much other junk that it just doesn't make it worth it. And so if someone is like genuinely putting something online, gets a nice comment but gets 5 bad comments, does that mean it's bad? Because we know, I mean, didn't they run some report that a ton of the negative commentary on Star Wars, the Last Jedi, was sort of generated by bots, like it didn't really even exist. So it's a tricky thing. It's tricky. It's tricky. It's tricky. I've never done it, but I do know that there are some places, there are some literary magazines online that look for like a chapter. Like some places will be like, give us a chapter of your novel. I think I've even seen a contest that was like, give us a piece of a novel in progress. So there's just a zillion ways to do it. I just, I wouldn't, I don't know. I don't have the following to where if I did put something online, that I don't even think the bots would be interested in looking at my writing online.
Yeah, I don't know that they're doing it for notoriety. I think you're correct. It's probably just trying to get a quick dopamine hit. And I've been in that
Yeah.
mindset before. I've been like, I've written something today and I love it and I can't wait to show it to somebody so that they will love it too. I can clear as day remember examples of that in my past. And then I would throw it over the fence at folks. And you know what's funny, Tim? As soon as I would throw it over the fence at somebody, I'd go back and read it again. Something's wrong with it. I need to fix it. And then I'm like, oh
Oh yeah.
damn, I sent them
Oh
the
yeah.
wrong version. The thing I sent them
Oh
was
yeah.
horrible.
Oh yeah.
This is the jewel, you know. So it's like, come on.
Yeah.
But no, I can see that.
I
You know, if you're just looking for a quick dopamine hit, but again, to what you said, I think the risk is too high. If you throw something out
the
into
risk
the
is too high.
world, yeah, it's way too high. I mean, you're like you said, you're gonna get 5 to 1 bad to good just because people are shitty,
Yeah.
and social media is
Yeah.
largely the worst of what we are as a species. So
Yeah.
I just don't want to expose myself to
But
that kind of risk.
maybe if you have grown callous to that, that might be a nice way to find that community of readers. If you're like, this is the kind of stuff that I write, and then you get like, whatever commentary back, maybe what the intent originally was with social media, to build those connections. Maybe that's a pathway for you to find someone who might be an alpha reader or a beta reader or someone that could take a look at things and develop that kind of relationship. So maybe there is some good with it. Maybe there is some good to it. I just
Yeah.
maybe I'm just sort of maybe I'm aging out of that sort of pathway though.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm creeping into the get off my lawn part of our journey. So I don't
Right.
want to do that
Yeah.
just yet. I think with the 2020 election and so
Oh,
much of the COVID fallout, and there's just so much chaos and negativity that
yeah.
actually created opportunities for me to cull, the friend lists to the point where I
Yeah.
really don't engage on social media anymore because the people that I want to keep close, I do that in real life, either through phone
Yeah.
or text, direct messaging, that kind of thing. Back to like, how do you develop a writing community? Yay, I think you're onto something. You can definitely shoot flares into those groups and say, I'm looking to develop a core writing group. And then as people reply, the shitty people you just don't include, the people who are
Yeah.
genuine and
Yeah.
nice and like want to help, they'll bubble up to the surface pretty quickly. And yeah, that's a great way to put together your own writing team.
There are other ways as well, using social media and using the way that we live online nowadays. I think that was another one of the beautiful metaphors that you came up with, firing a flare out into social media for things. But you can also, if you have pieces, there are literary magazines that you can submit to that will give you feedback. Now, a lot of times that feedback is going to cost you. So how important is it to you? That's the decision that you have to make, finding out how much they're going to charge you for it. But that's another way to sort of have someone read the piece blind that can help you with that.
Yeah.
And along with that, those communities, you only get what what is that statement? You only get what you put in, or whatever it is. This is the first time I've obviously ever used it, but
Right. I think it's you
um,
get out of
we,
it what you put into it.
you, welcome to the writing podcast where Tim doesn't know how to use words. There are a lot of communities. I see this on Twitter a lot, where there are writing communities, and if you have the engagement, you will find folks that kind of can give you engagement back. So yes, there is going to be that, username hullabaloo 64829 who's just trying to talk some smack about your piece. But if you're engaging in social media with other people in a confident and positive way, in a constructive way, that's going to just only build and build and build and build. And I see that a lot on Twitter. And I see that with a lot of literary magazines where, they're supporting one another. And, some literary magazines are, like I said, have that feedback, or will take pieces that you've written in other magazines and boost that kind of stuff. So yeah, sending a flare out there, it can be dicey, but you can try and turn it to your benefit to find that community. Just one of the many, many ways that you can do it.
Yeah, I think if you're going to do it, that's the right approach, what you're talking about, which is I'm going to try to drum up a reading group because I don't have as many people as I want looking at my work. But, I was talking about a very specific example of a person just sort of scraping some of their
Yeah.
work and throwing it out there and going, "Do you like me?" And I'm like, "What are you
Yeah.
doing?" So there's one last thing I wanted to mention as far as receiving feedback, and I think it's really helpful to wait a little while before you consider the feedback, especially if you're really going to consider making changes to your work. Too often, I have found myself in a trap where I get what I think is excellent feedback, and it might be, but it's feedback that has a clear point of view from another person. And I go, "Oh, that's the way to fix my work." And then I whoosh, make this fundamental substantive change to line up with what this other person told me. And then later, I kind of come back to it and go, I might have been a little too hasty there. I think it's important to wait and get distance just to take the emotion out of the decision, right? Because it might be the best advice ever and you might end up taking it, but like just sit on it for a little while before you make that decision.
That's actually a really, really great piece of advice. I've done that before where it's like, oh, yeah, that's right. Maybe this is the focus and I just didn't know it. You got to listen to yourself still. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and some people are really good salespeople, and they're like, I have a clear vision of what your story should be. If I were to write it, I would do X, Y, and Z. And then I'm
Right.
like, oh, I want to read that. And well, I'll try to do X, Y, and Z, and I end up not being able to do it. So, yeah, you got to write
Yeah.
your own
Yeah.
story, man. You got to write your own story. So even if you get great advice from
Yeah.
somebody else, this is what I would do. That's the kind of stuff I try to discount now. If you get a lot of advice going, well, what I would do is. It's like, okay, well,
Yeah.
you're writing the story now. Like, just tell me as a reader what you liked, what you didn't, where you thought it fell apart, what you want more of. Like, that's the kind of stuff that really helps so that I can see what its impact is on you as a reader, not you're a better writer than I am, so tell me how to fix my story. Like, that's not what we're looking for
Right.
in feedback.
Even though you're hearing all of these other voices giving you advice or telling you what worked for them or telling you didn't, telling you about your dangling participles, it's still trying to tune into your voice and what feels right coming back from them to make the piece that you want to have out there in the world.